July 1944. The morning arrived wrapped in mist. Not the thick kind that swallowed entire landscapes, just enough to blur edges, just enough to turn certainty into doubt. Somewhere along a scarred stretch of battlefield in northwest Europe, a British sniper squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked. The sound rolled away across broken earth and shattered trees. A German soldier nearly half a mile away collapsed. The sniper calmly worked the bolt, waited, watched, then fired again and again. By mid-morning, 50 rounds had left the barrel. 50 carefully chosen shots. 50 reminders that somewhere in the landscape an invisible hunter was watching. Then the firing stopped. The sniper lowered the rifle. Beside him, another soldier reached for a teacup. The cup touched the ground. The men relaxed. Across the battlefield, inside a German observation post that had spent 6 days trying to find them, something strange happened. The observers fell silent. No new reports, no corrections, no signals, nothing. At first, nobody understood why. The British certainly didn't. But inside that observation bunker, several exhausted men were staring through their optics with expressions that bordered on disbelief. Because at that exact moment they were searching for a muzzle flash that no longer existed. And they were beginning to realize they might have spent 6 days hunting a ghost. For nearly a week, the duel had consumed both sides. The German observation team had a straightforward mission: find the sniper, locate the firing position, direct artillery, end the problem. Simple. At least on paper. The first shot had seemed routine, a casualty among many. The second attracted attention. The fifth became a concern. By the 10th, commanders were asking questions. After dozens of accurate hits spread over several days, the sniper became something far more dangerous than a marksman. He became a mystery. The Germans knew he was there. Men were dying. Reports kept arriving. Yet every effort to locate him ended the same way: failure. Observers studied the terrain through powerful optics. They recorded likely positions, mapped firing angles, tracked patterns, compared witness statements. Each evening they left believing they were closer. Each morning another shot proved otherwise. The landscape itself seemed to be protecting him, and that frightened them more than the rifle. War creates strange obsessions, especially among men whose job is observation. The German team began noticing details: a patch of earth, a cluster of debris, an oddly shaped mound, a damaged section of terrain that never seemed to change. At first, these details appeared meaningless. Then patterns began emerging, or at least they thought they did. One observer became convinced the sniper was concealed inside a ruined position, partially hidden beneath camouflage netting. Another argued for a nearby shell crater. A third believed the rifle was operating from a shattered hedgerow. Arguments erupted, calculations filled notebooks, theories multiplied. Nobody agreed. Yet everyone felt close, dangerously close, like detectives standing outside a locked room, convinced the answer was only one clue away. They did not realize the clue itself was part of the deception. A few miles away, British camouflage specialists were fighting an entirely different war. They were not famous soldiers. Most never appeared in headlines. Some had backgrounds in art, others in architecture, design, theater, painting, photography. Before the war, many had spent their lives creating illusions. Now they were using those same skills to save lives. Traditional officers sometimes viewed them with suspicion. Their work looked ridiculous. Instead of weapons, they carried brushes, fabric, paint, wood, clay, wire, scraps, junk. One officer reportedly joked that they appeared more suited to decorating a shop window than fighting a war. Yet battle after battle, the results spoke for themselves. Because camouflage at its highest level was never about hiding. It was about controlling what the enemy believed, and that required imagination. The sniper team understood this principle better than most. Every day they occupied a position that should have been impossible to defend. German observers watched the area constantly. Artillery batteries stood ready. One mistake could bring dozens of shells crashing down around them. A single visible flash. A single unusual shape. A single suspicious movement. That was all it would take. So they transformed their position into something the enemy would never question, something ordinary, something forgettable, something invisible precisely because it appeared unimportant. The greatest camouflage artists knew a secret. Human beings rarely examine familiar objects. The eye notices anomalies, the mind ignores the expected, and that weakness could be weaponized. Raya of the fifth day. Frustration inside the German observation post had become palpable. The bunker smelled of damp uniforms and cigarette smoke. Maps covered tables. Empty coffee cups sat forgotten in corners. Men slept in shifts. Tempers shortened. Every new casualty report felt like a personal insult. The sniper was no longer simply killing soldiers. He was embarrassing professionals. One observer became obsessed with locating muzzle flashes. Every rifle shot produced a brief signature. Tiny, momentary, but visible. Find the flash and you found the sniper. At least that was the theory. So the Germans watched. Hour after hour, day after day. Eyes fixed on likely sectors. Waiting, searching, hunting. They were convinced success was only a matter of time. They had no idea their enemy understood exactly what they were looking for. The most effective deceptions are rarely complicated. They succeed because they exploit expectations. The British camouflage team studied the battlefield exactly as the Germans studied it. Then they asked a different question. Instead of asking where a sniper should hide, they asked where observers expected a sniper to hide. The difference was enormous. One approach followed reality. The other manipulated perception. Soon, a bizarre collection of materials began accumulating around the sniper position. Cheesecloth, clay, scrap metal, paint, fabric, bits of battlefield debris, nothing impressive, nothing dramatic. Certainly nothing capable of changing a battle, or so it appeared. The transformation happened slowly, layer by layer, texture by texture, color by color, until something extraordinary emerged. Not a bunker, not a fortification, an illusion. The Germans continued watching, their confidence grew. Evidence appeared to confirm their theories. Certain locations seemed increasingly suspicious. Certain shapes attracted attention. Certain sectors became the focus of intense observation. Everything pointed toward a solution. Everything made sense. Until it didn't. Because every observation they made had been anticipated. Every conclusion guided. Every suspicion encouraged. The battlefield itself had become a stage, and the observers had unknowingly accepted their assigned roles. Then came the morning of the 50th shot. The same morning that would later become famous among British camouflage units. The sniper fired. A target fell. Observers searched. Another shot. More searching. Again. 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 Hours passed. The Germans remained focused on the area they believed concealed the rifle. Every new shot reinforced their assumptions. Every report strengthened their confidence. Then suddenly the firing stopped. The sniper lowered his weapon. A teacup was set beside him. The duel seemed finished. But inside the observation post, something far more significant was happening. An observer noticed a discrepancy, then another, then a third. Tiny inconsistencies. Details that refused to align, the kind that appear harmless until viewed together. A shape that should have moved never moved. A suspected position failed to behave as expected. A pattern collapsed. The room grew quiet. Not because the sniper had disappeared, because the observers had begun understanding what they were actually seeing, or rather, what they weren't seeing. Imagine spending 6 days tracking footprints, following them through forests, across rivers, over hills, only to discover they belonged to a decoy dragged behind someone else. That was the realization spreading through the bunker. The Germans had not been observing a sniper position. They had been observing part of the camouflage, an illusion specifically designed to attract attention, a false answer to a carefully constructed question. Every hour spent studying it had drawn attention away from the real location. And the real location sat in plain sight, close enough to be seen, too ordinary to be noticed. The revelation hit with almost physical force. Some observers reportedly checked calculations repeatedly. Others returned to previous notes. looking for mistakes, searching for reassurance. There was none. The evidence pointed in only one direction. They had been deceived. Completely. The hidden position itself was a masterpiece of wartime ingenuity. Using little more than cheesecloth, clay, paint, scrap materials, and relentless patience, British camouflage specialists had altered the visual language of the battlefield. Contours were softened, shadows manipulated, textures duplicated, artificial surfaces blended into natural surroundings. The rifle disappeared into an environment carefully designed to absorb attention rather than attract it. Even more impressive, false indicators directed observers elsewhere. Potential firing points appeared where none existed. Suspicious shapes invited scrutiny. Visual clues encouraged incorrect conclusions. The camouflage did not merely conceal, it actively misled. And that distinction changed everything. Because hiding protects you from observation, deception controls observation. One is defensive, the other is offensive. For the sniper team, the success felt strangely anticlimactic. There were no celebrations, no speeches, no dramatic declarations, just exhaustion, relief, quiet satisfaction. They had survived 6 days under the eyes of determined hunters, 6 days during which a single mistake could have ended everything. The teacup returned to waiting hands. The rifle rested. The battlefield carried on. Yet something important had shifted. The Germans now knew a frightening truth. The enemy possessed the ability to vanish in plain sight. And once that possibility enters the mind, certainty becomes difficult. Every shadow becomes suspicious. Every object becomes a question. Every assumption becomes dangerous. The war would produce larger battles, greater victories, more famous moments. But hidden among them were countless stories like this one, stories where imagination defeated firepower, where observation lost to deception, where survival depended not on strength, but on understanding how people think. Because battlefields are not governed solely by weapons, they are governed by perception, what soldiers believe, what commanders assume, what observers think they see. The British sniper team understood that reality long before the Germans did. And on that mist-covered morning, after the 50th shot had echoed away and the teacup touched the ground, the lesson revealed itself with brutal clarity. The German observers were not defeated because they lacked skill. They were not defeated because they lacked courage. They were defeated because they trusted their eyes. And sometimes the most dangerous thing on a battlefield is not an enemy hidden from view. It is an enemy who has learned how to guide your gaze exactly where he wants it to go. Long after the rifle fell silent, that realization remained. A haunting reminder that the finest camouflage is not the art of becoming invisible. It is the art of convincing everyone else that they are already looking at the truth.